All right, so we are starting 2024 off, and I'm actually going to bring on somebody talking about something unique on my channel, something that I've really never talked about at all, I don't think, in any of my videos. And before your eyes glaze over and you're not interested because it's not a video specifically about sync licensing or how to succeed with this business, it's an extremely crucial topic, and that is about financial literacy, investing, planning for your future, planning for your retirement, planning for you to be artistically free. And we're going to talk about that with my guest here in just a minute. But the reason why this is something you really want to spend at least the next 20, 30 minutes with us taking seriously is because you're spending a lot of time and a lot of effort working on tracks for production music libraries, and you're hoping to get a lot of these placements, right? So you're obviously trying to build up part-time or full-time income. What are you going to do with those royalties, with those sync fees, with those consideration fees once they hit your bank account? Because they go directly into your bank account. And I can tell you, if your plan is just to store it in a checking account, you'll just see how quickly inflation eats that up. And I'm starting to feel that. I think all of us are starting to feel that in the last couple of years. So just taking your knowledge base up one notch in terms of understanding what are the different options you can be doing with your finances, with your planning for your future, and thinking about your career in terms of not just like, what am I going to get this month or this year, but what am I going to have in my nest egg in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road. Some of us might not get that far down the road, but it's a really, really important topic. So I really encourage you guys to at least hear me out on this. And this is also something that I'm just personally interested in. So sorry, I'm going to dive into these topics when I think they're really relevant. And I think they do connect to us as musicians and producers. So I want you guys to meet Spencer List. So Spencer is my guest on this video, and he is a certified financial planner. And he's been dedicated for many years, his entire career essentially, to helping musicians and music industry professionals achieve artistic freedom. He used the word artistic freedom in his bio, not financial freedom, which is what a lot of financial planners will say. So I'm going to ask him about why he used that word artistic. I think it's a really interesting answer that he's going to give. He's also the host of the Thriving Musician podcast. So that's a podcast dedicated to essentially talking about all of the kind of elephants in the room, some of the kind of uncomfortable topics about money and investing. And he has many different guests. I actually was, or I will be a guest on his podcast whenever he releases. I'm not sure the timeline in terms of this interview, but he talks about building for savings, planning for your retirement, investing, insurance, tax preparation, financial organization, estate planning, music business resources and strategies, marketing, and then, of course, mental health and mindset. You wouldn't think those are going to be connected, but those are vital throughout all of those things, especially in tax preparation. I think you're going to need a lot of mental health for that. So, Spencer, thank you so much for joining us, man. Really, really appreciate it. You and I kind of connected on LinkedIn a few months back, and what I found really unique and interesting about you is that you're a financial planner, and you're 100% focused and specifically focused on helping musicians get financially literate and plan for their future. Why would you do something crazy like that?
Yeah, and I've actually found a couple other people who do this as well, so that's been really nice. But when I first started, yes, I felt like I was the only one doing this. So I was a professional musician for many years. I have a master's in jazz studies. I started playing professionally in 2006, play all the saxophones and woodwinds, played with local acts, national acts, tons of records, sort of just traveled, did everything I could do to make a living performing. That was my main goal. And I did some teaching, but I really wanted to do performing. And so that's what I was able to achieve that, and I was really happy with that. But there was a point, I think August, can't remember the year, maybe 2015 or something like that. I was on a tour the West Coast during the summer, and I was away from home for a long time. It wasn't a tour that paid that well. It was more for fun, but I was away from home, so I wasn't really gigging and making a lot of the good money back at home, and I was spending while I was gone. So I got home from that tour and the travel, and I had $67 in my checking account. And so it was like this wake up call. It's like kind of my first personal financial crisis. Up until that point, I'd been really good at saving. I felt like I was doing well financially. I was making a living performing. I was really proud of where I was and the life I was living. And then realizing that even just a few weeks, I was only a few weeks away basically from having no money. And so that was a wake up call for me. And I remember saying to myself in that moment, I never want to feel this way again. I was confused and fearful and, scared and vulnerable at that moment. And I also said, no other musician should feel this way either. It doesn't make sense. Why aren't we talking about these topics, learning about them, and living better lives through financial awareness? So I started teaching myself everything I could through books and podcasts. And that curiosity led me to becoming a certified financial planner But during that process, I bought my first property within 18 months. I started saving into a retirement account for the first time. My income increased by improving my mindset. So I started teaching everything I learned to the musicians in my community. So that's what started Thriving Musician. So yeah, so now I'm a professional certified financial planner, and so it's I feel very fulfilled to give back to the community that I was a part of for so long, and I still am a part of, and in a way that I am just now finding some other people who do this, but up until recently, you don't hear the things that, that I advise on and that I teach. It's just not common in our industry, and so yeah, that's about the size of it. So it's very fulfilling to give back to musicians in a topic that is incredibly crucial to artistic freedom.
Yeah, and I think the reason why you're extremely relevant for me and for our audience is because you're a musician yourself. And we've also been talking on my channel about AI in the last year. And when I get a data scientist to come on board, when they're a musician themselves, it just helps bridge that gap so much better because we can just kind of have a common understanding that we're on the same team. You know, we might not be playing in the same band or the same instrument, but music is this kind of culture that if you play it, if you're a part of it, you can feel it and you can kind of sense that people sort of get it, right? So that's what I think is really interesting about your background and you also being able to just to speak the language of musicians and producers. I think that's kind of one of the things that I try to do as well because I'm obviously a producer myself. And a lot of what I do on this channel is talking about business mindset. It's about getting out of the artistic egocentric, you know, everybody should just lavish me with gifts and fame and money and all this amazing stuff and attention, but rather I try to flip people into a more of a service mindset and think externally in terms of how is your music going to make somebody else's life or project better or easier or more emotionally connected, right? So I have a couple of theories for this, but I'm curious, what do you think? I think it's a fact. I don't know what the percentage would be, but I do think that most musicians and probably producers are not financially literate. And I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean that maybe most of humanity is financially illiterate. But I do find that when I have been interacting with a lot of musicians and producers that there is a sort of like ceiling on their understanding of how business works, how money works, how investing works, how long-term delayed gratification works. That's a big part of what we do in sync licensing. So what's your theory as to why a lot of musicians are not financially literate and why that is the case? Is that just across the board or is there something happening with musicians that we sort of are limited in our understanding here?
Yeah, all of the above. So yes, I think most humans in this world are maybe financially illiterate is too harsh of a word, but just, you know, we just don't have that basic knowledge because no one's talking about this. It's the money is the last taboo. We talk about sex and politics and all these other taboos now that we used to, not in religion. And money is still like the last one standing that people feel uncomfortable talking about it because in most cases we grew up in our families or guardians or whoever took care of us didn't talk about it. We only witnessed their behaviors around money. We saw how they were using it, how they were talking about it, and but not talking about it intentionally. You're just hearing others interact with it and maybe say beliefs about it, whether that's positive or negative. And we're sponges when we're younger. And so I think in general, most people are. And with musicians, I think even more so because in the music industry, there's a lot of you mentioned ego, but I would say maybe there's this difficulty of when we are the product or our art needs to be commercialized. There's all these connections between what you are doing and the value you're providing to others. It's connected to you and who you are and the type of music you make. And so it can be difficult to detach those things. And so we get caught up in a lot of what do I look like? How am I dressing? Does my music sound good? There's a lot of validation we need. Is the audience applauding or not? And so I think that can get in the way of having we're focused on, you know, making more income, marketing our music, treating it as a business and all these things and name dropping who you've played with and all these things. And we think those are important because that's the language everyone else uses around us. And so I think that blocks these real conversations that, like you said, maybe some people, their eyes glaze over, but it's because no one else around you is talking like this and saying these words and encouraging you to think about these topics that can change your life and, you know, allow you to share more art with the world over a long period of time. So yeah, that's my high level answer of why I think that's the case. And I do think that's changing though. And this is one example of that. Like you inviting me to speak on this to your audience is massive. These are the steps of just having these conversations. The more we do that, the more we can break the ice and get deeper into, we won't talk about each person's money stories, but we all have them. And these are the things that we should be asking ourselves. What are my money stories? Stuff like that. And it will all come around if we deal with those things and heal our relationship with money. We can heal our relationship with music. We can make better music. Everything gets better when we learn about these things.
Beautifully said. And yeah, it's a very eloquent theory. I think I would just sign on to yours over mine, actually. So let's actually break into that ice right now. What is financial literacy? Let's actually get some definitions here.
Sure.
I think of when somebody says, "Are you financially literate?" I guess what I'm picturing is probably some sort of a list of concepts or terms that one would be aware of to say, "Well, yes, I understand compounding interest," for example.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you define financial literacy? Is there a definition that you would hold on to? And are there maybe a set of terms, key terms, or concepts that you would recommend people watching this channel be aware of to be able to say, "Yeah, I think I have a good handle on finances and money"?
Yeah, sure. So I think most of the music industry will talk about finances in relation to your business. So I focus on that some because that's a part of your life, but more so on the personal finances. And so at a high level, I would say I would call myself financially literate if I know what to do with my money so that I can live my ideal life. So that can mean a lot of different things, but learning about finances and money is infinite. It gets really complicated, or it can get complicated, but we don't have to go that far to know enough to set ourselves up for success. So I would say at a high level, understanding what cash flow is, how does that work? Your taxes, every time you generate income, how is that working? How is that flowing? Insurance, estate planning, investments, just really there are high level topics that we just want to have a broad understanding of. And then we can either learn more and dive deeper, or we can have someone help us like understand those things or educate us. To go deeper, I think there are terms that I would say are really important for someone who just wants to say, I am personally financially literate and I know what to do with my money for me. Things like what is your net worth and how to calculate it. Compound interest, like you mentioned, is the most powerful thing on the planet. Time value of money, active versus passive income, right? When you're making your music, that's active, but then once it starts paying out later, that becomes passive. You're no longer having to do anything to generate that income. And that ties into taxes. How is that taxed? A tax deduction versus a tax credit, those are wildly different things. Assets versus liabilities, interest and dividends that you might receive in your bank accounts or investments, a stock versus a bond, and other investment vehicles like real estate, commodities. There's a lot of other ones out there. An LLC, a limited liability company. Do you want to limit the liability of your company, that is you, and or do you want to take it a step further and make an S corp election? So I'm starting to get a little bit more advanced, but these are still very important. Amortization versus depreciation. So I'll stop there on the list of words. We can definitely go deeper, but I think no one should be discouraged by not knowing what some of those words mean. And you don't have to go ultra deep to be financially literate for you to live a happy and artistically fulfilled life.
That's great. Yeah. Now let me ask you something here. This is a really important point because you said financial literacy means you know what you should do with your money to live the life that you want to live. Now here's the big trick with that. In 2008, you and I have talked about this. I knew that buying gold was the way for me to get the life I wanted, right? I knew that I withdrew my money out of a 401k, put it all into gold because I knew that was the right move because the people I was following was telling me that was the move. So this is the whole trick right here, right? Is that we can obviously be completely I'm not going to say delusional, but convinced of one particular path that feels right because it seems to echo with our previous held beliefs, or it's just somebody made a really strong case. So how do you know if you got it right or wrong? Is there any way to really know other than just literally trying stuff out and making mistakes or finding success? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, twofold, two things. So, um, the first one is I think that experience is really useful. Trial and error. That is how we get better. That's how we learn from our mistakes. Um, although we can make mistakes, let's talk about investing just really quickly about gold. Um, you can actually make mistakes and it play out very well, which leads to overconfidence and leads to you continuing to make that mistake, thinking that it's going to continue to repeat. And so it could have been a situation where gold blew up and you felt like, wow, I made the right decision. And this happens a lot with people, depending on when people participated in crypto. There's all these bubbles that happen, real estate, things like that, where we made this sort of shot in the dark decision, thinking that it was the right thing to do, and it worked out. So there's actually situations where then we believe that that's what we should keep doing. And so I would say, in terms of trial and error, it's important to understand what's at risk. So if this is something that could blow you up completely, maybe we don't just dump our entire life savings into it, right? So we can mitigate that
Hold on, I got to
risk
cancel
and
something real
try
quick.
it.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
And we can try those things, but maybe it's just we're not going to put everything on the line for it. So I think trial and error is a great way to learn, as long as you're not, betting the house, so to speak, on those financial decisions. The other thing, which is something I was probably going to say at some point or another, so this is a great time, is to find trusted professionals and resources. So that can be difficult, especially in a social media world where I don't have TikTok, but people in my world share some of the videos that are out there of people giving financial advice that have no business doing so and kind of saying extreme things. One of the things I would recommend is when you hear something that sounds too good to be true or that it's really easy. I'm sure you've talked to this about, sync licensing. Like, this is not something that's just easy, quick, fast money. Then, red flags should be going up. So that's something to try to keep your radar up, like trust but verify. There are also websites where you can look up if someone's certified, if they've had any disclosures. So that means someone's complained or they've been, sued or anything like that. So there are things out there to check and make sure who you're learning from and talking to. And the last thing I'll say about, finding trusted professionals and resources is to understand how those people are paid and or incentivized. So there are a lot of people who either are working for a company or themselves, and they have an incentive to sell you a product. That might be something like a life insurance product that may or may not be a good fit for you, but they are good salespeople and can convince you that that's a good thing for you. If you understand how they're paid, that can give you some insight into whether this is something that makes sense for you or not, knowing what their intentions and incentives are. And that goes for the same as someone who's saying, hey, this is the time to get into gold or whatever that thing might be, especially during crisis. Our emotions flare up during those times because we're like, I don't know what to do. And then someone says, well, here's the solution. You're like, okay, great. All right, I'm going to do that. And so, yeah, that's a lot of different answers for that question, but I hope that's helpful.
It is, absolutely, yeah. And I found now I'm developing one of my major rules for investing, which is if I'm ever excited, like I feel like dopamine rush, heartbeat increase for some excitement about an investment opportunity, red flag all over the place. And it's hard to say no to that stuff because you want to see a huge 20x payout in the next 6 months. And that's what somebody's talking about on YouTube or, like you said, TikTok or whatever. And yeah, it's like I'm starting to realize that like the long-term payoff, delayed gratification means slow and steady over many years with the compounding interest. It shouldn't be that exciting. And in some cases, it's kind of painful to sit there and wait. And when is it going to really start to have these massive returns? And like, I'm finding that that's probably a sign that I'm doing something right. If it's just a long drudge, again, none of this is financial advice for anybody watching. You guys make your own
Right.
decisions, but I'm just sharing with you guys one of my little rules. So, anyways, what are some of the common mistakes? I know you consult with many musicians. You talk to many, label musicians, independent musicians, producers, composers. I'm sure every type of
Mhm.
music creator. What are some of the big common mistakes that you run into over and over again as you're offering some advice and insights for your clients?
Yeah, a few things. The first one is ignoring the past and the future. So a lot of people I speak with are very present focused. We got the horse blinders on. We're thinking about, how do I make money this month? How do I write this thing for this person? Whatever it is, it's hustle grind, whatever you want to call it, work ethic. It's very, what am I doing now, or what do I need to do for next month? So it's not necessarily just the present, but like maybe just short-sightedness. So examples of ignoring the past might be credit card debt. You owe back taxes. Maybe you're late on rent payments or loans. Not thinking about what's happened in the past and rectifying those things if they need to be. Ignoring the future, not saving, not thinking about what will life look like in 10, 20, 40 years. Some of you 80 years. Like, we're going to live to 100 probably is my the assumptions that I use when I do planning. And so that's a long time. And I talk to a lot of musicians who, some don't think about this and some do, is especially ones who are more active, is, I don't want to be doing this when I'm 70. And it doesn't mean they don't want to be doing music, but they don't want to be physically, getting up on stage or whatever it might be that they're doing, especially those who tour. But even for you who are doing sync licensing, you know is that something that you're gonna wanna be doing? Maybe your interests change, maybe your tastes change. There's so many things that life can unfold in so many different ways. We have to consider what that might look like. We don't have to know, we never have a crystal ball, but if we're not thinking about the future, and not just musically, I mean, family, buying a home, um, if you wanna start a family, there's a lot of things in the future. How is our health gonna look in 10, 20, 30, 40 years? You can start planning for that now. And there's a lot of really cool strategies to set yourself up for that, to reduce your taxes and do all these things, but we have to think about them now in order to take advantage of those strategies. So ignoring the future, I think, is a big one as well. The next thing is neglecting or ignoring risks. I kind of mentioned that earlier, is when we're thinking about making a decision, it's really easy to just not understand what's really at stake. And so there's a difference between, like taking a risk of, like, let's say you have a nice car, you don't want it to get dinged up. If you park at the grocery store, if you park up front with all the cars, there is a slight chance that someone might ding your car with their door. But what's the cost of fixing a ding on your car, right? It's fairly low. So you could park your car farther away. It's just like, it's not that high risk, but if you don't want that to happen, so that's very low risk. But then there's some things that are higher risk. If you're disabled and you lose the ability to hear or something like that for the rest of your life, that's a really high risk. And so there are other financial decisions that have high risks, like investing. It depending on how you're investing, are you willing to lose it all? And I'm not saying that investments all can lose their value, but technically they can. And so, are we diversified enough? Things like that. So, disability, life, health, home insurance, auto, umbrella. Someone could sue you for whatever reason in your business. Or it could be, if you have a dog and that dog bites someone at your house, or they slip and fall on your sidewalk. There's everything in life has some level of risk. And so we just want to understand what those are whenever we're making decisions. So I think ignoring risk is another one I see. And it's not that people don't care about risk, it's just that, like I said before, we don't talk about these things. But we do hear about people having experiences of massive risk. I'm sure some of you watching have seen someone pull up the GoFundMe or the Kickstarter because their instruments and gear were stolen out of their car. And there's all these things, or to pay for medical bills, because an emergency happened. So you see the risk out there, but we never psychologically think it's going to happen to us. So I think it's really important to understand that all of these things could happen to us, and how can we mitigate those risks. The last thing is a lot more common is not tracking income and expenses, especially for those of us with variable income. Um, what's not tracked can't be improved. There's some sort of quote about that, and so I think that's one of the first steps to financial literacy is understanding where you are today, and then you can make decisions to improve your financial situation. So yeah, those are the three high level things I would say that I see people, musicians and artists, not focusing on that are very, very important.
Yeah, that's really helpful, and I can definitely empathize with the sort of the ignoring the risks or not wanting to think about the risks, because even just you listing all those, I'm getting like anxious just thinking about slipping on the sidewalk and a dog biting somebody and my losing my hearing. It's like these are really uncomfortable thoughts, but you're right. It's
Yeah,
because it is the elephant in the room. It is the sort of, we're not trying to jinx anybody, but these are real things that can happen to any one of us at any point. And nothing in life is guaranteed. And I think you're right, trying to get to that point where you can kind of just be the adult in the room and try to just talk about it, accept that these are some things that I have to be, potentially aware of, that it's a low chance some of these will happen, but if they do, what's my plan for that? What am I going to do about that?
absolutely.
It's just really a very uncomfortable topic. And that probably explains why a lot of this stuff is just sort of, no, thanks. I want to go watch TikTok.
Yep.
What was
Yeah,
that guy saying
exactly.
about those investment ideas? I should go check him out. Right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
let's go ahead and wrap up this one with maybe some common sense rules that you can maybe share with us. Of course, not financial advice for anybody. Everybody's got their
Hmm.
own specific situation, but planning for retirement. It's something that I've got two daughters now. I'm really thinking top of mind about what is my life going to look like when I'm 60, 65, 70? What are my daughter's lives going to look like when they're turning 18? Do I want to have some stuff set aside for them? And I'm trying to figure out, what do I do with all this? So any common sense rules or guidance you can give for all of us, general stuff, of course, that can help us just start thinking in the right direction for our retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'll describe the. You said the word retirement, so I'll quickly describe the three terms that I use for that word. So, retirement is kind of a traditional word for not having enough assets to live off of, so you don't have to work anymore. And then financial freedom is sort of like the next step you might hear out there, and that's sort of the difference between retirement and financial freedom is the option to work or not, and to be work optional. And for artists, I think I use the word artistic freedom because for most musicians and for those of you watching, I imagine most of you don't want to stop doing music. And so I think artistic freedom is just to to have, the financial freedom to do your art however you want, free of any obligations. So those three words can be used in any way you want. Retirement's just kind of like the boring one that definitely, it glazes my eyes over. So artistic freedom, I like to use that word because I think that resonates more. So to do that, I think high level, just I had three things. One of them I already mentioned, but the was to find trusted professionals and resources um, that can either educate you or work with you. There's plenty of good resources out there, and I'll share as many of as I can, and we can share links to those things. Outside of the education that I do, of course. The other two things are very simple concepts: spend less than you earn. And the best way to do that is, like I said earlier, to start tracking your income and expenses. And that can sometimes be difficult because we start seeing what we're actually spending money on. We actually see what income we're generating. There's a lot of feelings and emotions that go along with that, but we have to start somewhere and understand that we're going to progress. Those numbers are going to improve. Those numbers don't define you. Um, and once we know some of those numbers, you know, if we're spending the same or more than what we earn, then we're not able to save for the future because eventually we want to live off of our own assets and our own money. So spend less than you earn. The other one is save early and often. Um, it's difficult when we're younger to think about saving because, like I said, we're thinking about our careers right now. We want to make it happen. We want to put in the time. We want to put in the work and see the fruits of our labor. So delayed gratification is a word that you've used often, and I think that's a great way to describe it. Is that along with compound interest, which we can talk about another time, but look up that word and see what that means and understand it. It's incredibly powerful that the earlier you start saving and the more often you start saving, even if it's like $10 a month. I mean, it could be not it could be $1 a month or something. You start somewhere and you slowly increase that amount, increase the frequency, you're going to see the curve of your assets skyrocket over time. Now, it'll take decades, but the earlier you start, the faster it goes. And there's a lot of cool calculations out there that show you the impact of saving early and saving often throughout your life. And there are a lot of different ways to save. And I think the biggest factor in doing that is understanding where you are so you know what money's there to save, how much can you reasonably save, and how can you slowly improve that. And yeah, the last thing was find trusted professionals and resources, like I said before.
Great. So not buying crypto. I didn't hear that. Okay.
Yeah, we can
That's
definitely
really
talk about
helpful.
that in the future.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's really helpful, and thank you for all of these great, just eloquent answers that are just really obviously well thought out. What we're gonna do is, if you guys made it to the end of this video, props to you guys. If you guys have specific questions for Spencer about finances, about investing, about quote unquote retirement or artistic freedom, or just setting yourself up for the future to be more flexible with your lifestyle, so you don't have to be constantly grinding every single week or every single month on short-term gigs. Post it below. Maybe it's about royalties, maybe it's about setting up an LLC as a musician, as a producer. Just post them all below as a comment, and we're going to try to get Spencer to come back for a round 2, maybe in a month or 2 months, once we get a good number of questions down there, and he'll do some research for us. He'll actually go look up the answers. He'll make sure he's got some really insightful, helpful tips for us, and he'll come back and answer all of your guys' questions. So thank you, Spencer, for offering to do that in advance.
Absolutely.
So take advantage of this. And if you guys want to learn more about Spencer, definitely go check out his podcast. There's going to be a link in the description box below, the Thriving Musician Podcast. Amazing, amazing content there. Again, start wrapping your head around these topics now. You know, don't wait until you're about to retire or thinking about retirement. Then like, oh yeah, what do I do for retirement? Whatever your age is, today is the right day to basically start thinking about this stuff and getting educated. Just a little bit at a time. You don't need to have a PhD. You don't have to become your own certified financial planner. As Spencer said, just you got to be a little dangerous in all of these different areas, so you know enough about it just to be dangerous, right? And then obviously he's got a couple of resources. He's got a blog. He's got some other. I think he does consulting services, right? So Spencer does a lot of stuff. He's got a lot of resources for you guys that are interested in this kind of topic. And I think it's vital. I know some of you might not be interested, but I think if you're watching this video at this point, it is something that you're interested in. So Spencer, thank you so much, man. Appreciate your time today, and we'll get you back hopefully in the next month or two. And yeah, thank you for just letting us talk about the elephant in the room. You know, it is still even a little uncomfortable for me to talk about this stuff, but the more that we have these conversations, I agree with you, the less awkward it is, the more accessible it is, and the more people can feel like they can ask questions and not feel like, oh, I don't want to ask a dumb question. There's no such thing, especially when it comes to your life, your future, your music, and your career. So thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.